Mario Kart is infamous for having game-breaking shortcuts in almost every single entry, whether it be skipping half of Rainbow Road in Mario Kart 64 or driving around this rock and grumble volcano to complete the entire track in 20 seconds in Mario Kart Wii. However, there is one Mario Kart game that has recently had an explosion in shortcuts, a Mario Kart game that most people didn't even consider to have any large shortcuts. This is the story of the Mario Kart 7 shortcut revolution. MK7 made its debut to the 3DS on December 1st, 2011, and with this release came 16 new tracks, 16 returning tracks, 17 playable characters, rest in peace Funky Kong, and a plethora of vehicles to choose from despite the removal of bikes from the previous entry. Alongside these features, MK7 introduced a new mechanic that would later on play a huge part in aiding shortcut discovery. This would be none other than the glider. The glider was a simple enough concept. You simply just go off one of these blue ramps and over time you naturally float down to the track. Considering the amount of airtime you are able to achieve with the glider, players were able to come up with small cuts to save time alongside a bunch of small non-glider cuts, whether it be intentional ones like this shortcut in Toad Circuit or unintentional ones like this shortcut in Woohoo Loop. Now wait a minute, how is this shortcut on Woohoo Loop possible? Well, you see, Mario Kart 7 has a problem. I'm sure most of you know that in each Mario Kart game, there's a set of invisible checkpoints scattered throughout each track. The way in which each of these checkpoints operate from game to game is different, but the concept is inherently the same. When it comes to MK7, the game wants you to cross each one in order, and if you somehow miss one, then you will have to go back to the key checkpoint that you missed to get the lap to count. In theory, this sounds like a very bulletproof system, but it gets a lot more complicated than this. When Lakitu gets added into the equation, he will use the checkpoints scattered across the track to determine where you should respawn. This is where a problem arises. In the case of Woohoo Loop, when you drive off of this part of the track, instead of Lakitu bringing you all the way back to the last checkpoint you were at, or even just bringing you back to where you initially were, he will instead just drop you off at the next checkpoint as the game registers the checkpoint to be the closest respawn point, and your lap is able to count because you still technically went through all of the key checkpoints in order. However, this wasn't the only problem with the checkpoint system. You see, these key checkpoints were zones that spanned from one key checkpoint to another, and these zones were rather huge. As I said earlier, the game wants you to go through each zone in order, but if you skip a zone, all you have to do to trick the game into thinking that you went through all of the zones is to simply go back to the previous zone and then continue on throughout the track. It was no wonder that a Mario Kart 7 shortcut revolution was bound to happen. This shortcut on Woohoo Loop would not only go on to save 5 seconds, as the non-shortcut world record is a 1:22 by Jacob while the shortcut world record is a 1:17, but it would also be coined as MK7's first glitch shortcut. Now if you know anything about MK7, you'll notice that there is a very similar track to Woohoo Loop. This would of course be none other than Maku Woohoo. Given the similarities between the two tracks, players would naturally levitate to the track to see if there were any shortcuts that could be pulled off. Spoiler alert, there was. If you drive off of this part of the track, the game once again gets confused as to where to put you, so Lakitu will simply just drop you off at the next key checkpoint zone, which for some reason is all the way at the end of this gigantic loop that you have to drive through. This means that by simply driving off the edge here, you are able to cut off 20 entire seconds. Keep in mind that we are still in December of 2011, and we already had 2 game-breaking glitch shortcuts, but when 2012 came around, things were going to get a lot crazier. Now, do you remember how earlier on in the video, I mentioned how the glider would play a huge part in aiding shortcut discovery? Well, enter DK Jungle. Now, normally you are supposed to drive through this entire temple section to get to this underwater part of the stage. However, some players just chose not to. If you hit one of these orange panels while you are still gliding, you will continue to be in the glider, which allows for you to traverse further distances. You are able to get just enough distance to fly through this wall, which doesn't have any hit detection, and make it it all the way to the underwater section without going through the temple. Since this doesn't skip any key checkpoint zones, the lap still counts. Unlike the previous two shortcuts, you are actually able to do this shortcut on all 3 laps, as it only requires 1 mushroom to pull off, which is exactly what players would do following the discovery of the shortcut. Just 3 months ago, a player by the name of Kai would set an impressive world record of 144.551, which currently lies 10 seconds ahead of the non-glitch world record by Momoji. Later on in the year, another respawn glitch would be discovered, and it would be none other than GBA Bowser Castle 1. The walls on GBA Bowser Castle 1 are so small that you can simply just jump over them, and if you die in this section of the track, you respawn up ahead on the other side of the track. But as the years passed, improvements to this shortcut were made. If you hop on the edge of this wall at the right angle, you are actually able to get a boost in height and distance, a boost that is big enough to make it to the other side of the track without having to do the respawn glitch. A player by the name of HRT would implement this into his time trials and would start to completely demolish this track. At the time of recording this video, he currently holds the world record with a time of 105.739, and for reference on how impressive this record is, this record looks almost identical to the TAS. For those who don't know what TAS is, the word TAS stands for Tool Assisted Speedrun, and essentially it is a perfect speedrun that is made possible through the use of software that allows for you to input inputs into the game for crazy results. However, it's not as easy as putting the game into software, as some games such as MK7 didn't have TAS available to them until years upon years after release, because TAS varies from game to game and console to console. When TAS became available to MK7, it was not only used to make groundbreaking discoveries, but it also exemplified how impressive these MK7 world records really were, as players were able to match a lot of the strategies and movement tech used within the TAS. That's enough about TAS for now though, because as far as this shortcut revolution goes, we are still in 2012 and TAS doesn't get introduced until a lot later. As players continued to optimize the game, a rather shocking discovery was made on Daisy Cruiser. This discovery wasn't just any simple cut or respawn glitch, it was an out of bounds exploit. Upon starting up a race on Daisy Cruiser, you spawn at the top of the ship, and as you progress through the lap, you go down the ship and then back up. The caveat here is that there are very small areas of the ship that do not have hit detection, because Nintendo did not anticipate these areas being accessible in the first place. One of those areas is this wall right here, as lining yourself up correctly allows for you to just drive straight through it and drop all the way down to the bottom of the ship. Despite skipping a large part of the track, you actually don't have to go backwards whatsoever, as you are still crossing the key checkpoint zones within order. Since you are able to do this cut on every single lap, you are able to save approximately 13 seconds per lap, making the world record with this glitch shortcut 39 entire seconds faster than the non-glitch world record. By the end of 2012, one more glitch shortcut was discovered, and it was once again nothing like what we had seen before. If you maintain your height after launching yourself off of this glider, you are actually able to land in this small little area. Now, landing here normally wouldn't be that much of a big deal, even if it's not intended, because you can easily just drive back onto the track. But the sloped curvature at the edge of this area makes it so that if you back up on it and then shroom forward, it gives you a boost in height. This boost in height is just enough to make it onto this portion of the track, allowing you to successfully skip a good chunk of the course. Since you don't have access to the glider on lap 1, you would only be able to do this shortcut on laps 2 and 3, but it would still end up saving well over 10 seconds. But this wasn't the case. You see, getting up to this area here wasn't all too complicated, as you can just drive backwards on this downward slope and use it almost like a ramp to get up. With the iteration of this new shortcut and optimizations to it over time, a player by the name of Momoji brought the world record all the way down to a 116, which stands a whole 23 seconds ahead of the non-glitch world record by Yasin. Now, if you know anything about Mario Kart Wii, you know that among many people, it holds the title for single-handedly being the most broken Mario Kart game of all time. Part of the reason for MKWilliam holding that title is because of this insane ultra shortcut that you're able to pull off on Maple Treeway. By doing this crazy bounce followed up by this cut here, you are able to skip half of Maple Treeway on all 3 laps. So surely, when Nintendo ported Maple Treeway over to MK7, they would make extra sure to design the track track in a way that would make it impossible for any exploits to happen, especially exploits of MKWii's caliber. By entering the cannon at this angle, you are able to propel yourself just high enough with the glider to make it onto this part of the track. We once again had a shortcut that was possible because Nintendo forgot about their sweet and precious hit detection. Even a simple invisible wall could have prevented this exploit from being a reality, but alas, MK7 had another glitch shortcut on its hands. Jacob would go on to absolutely demolish Maple Treeway as he was able to achieve a mid 144 on the track after years of pushing, a time that has not only stood the test of time, but a time that lies 28 seconds ahead of the non-glitch world record, which coincidentally enough is also held by Jacob. Now, if you know anything about Mario Kart Wii, you know that among many people it holds the title for single-handedly being the most broken Mario Kart game of all time. Part of the reason MKWii holds that title is because of this insane ultra shortcut that you are able to pull off on Koopa Cape. By doing this crazy wall clip, you are able to get out of bounds here, and if you drive backwards enough, you can respawn here, which allows for you to skip over half of the track. So surely, when Nintendo ported Koopa Cape over to MK7, they would be extra sure to design the track in a way that would make it impossible for any exploits to happen, especially exploits of MKWii's caliber. There would be one more shortcut that was discovered during 2013. Enter DS Luigi's Mansion. Upon entering the aforementioned mansion, there are of course a set of stairs. For years, they remained an ordinary pair of stairs. But if you learned anything from watching this video, you will know that areas, even with the slightest of slopes, have the potential to give you an exponential amount of height. I mean, just look at GBA Bowser Castle 1 or Neo Bowser City. At first glance, it doesn't look like getting a lot of height off of these stairs would take you anywhere, but if you hit this area right here, you are actually able to get pushed through the floor of the mansion. Luigi's Mansion was now just Luigi without the mansion. Jacob will once again come in and swoop the world record, and to this day it stands at a low 138. Surprisingly, the glitch world record only lies 4 seconds ahead of the non-glitch world record. 2014 would pass, and players would continue to push the game to its limits, but as far as the shortcut discovery goes, there really wasn't anything new. Eventually 2015 and 2016 would pass, but alas, there were still no new glitch shortcut discoveries. It seemed like MK7 was finally starting to fade into the dust when it came to shortcuts, but when 2017 came around, things would change. Given the abnormalities of MK7, players would of course try to see if there were any glitches that they were missing. I mean, they had found the easy ones, but with all these new shortcuts that took advantage of MK7's quirks and mechanics, there had to be more out there even if the difficulty to pull them off was much higher. So after a lot of time theorizing, some of these theories would start to prove true, and MK7 would once again ignite a shortcut revolution. Among the spark, Shy Guy Bazaar would be the first track that would fall victim to the theories that would come to fruition. If you take the top route through the bazaar, you are able to line yourself up on the edge right here, and if you shroom and hop at the right time, you can catapult yourself out of bounds just far enough to spawn in the next key checkpoint zone. Since this is a respawn glitch that requires mushrooms, you would only be able to do it on lap 3, but this didn't stop it from saving time, as the current world record of 2:00.682 by Jacob saves 2 seconds over the non-glitch world record. It would be a while until another shortcut was discovered, but when 2019 came around, the shortcut revolution was in full force. On Dino Dino Jungle, a respawn glitch shortcut was discovered, and it was a rather simple one. At least that's what it looks like. You see, when 2018 came around, people within the time trials community started to use checkpoint maps, the same maps that I have been using to visually represent how some of these shortcuts are able to be possible. However, there was something missing. It seemed that there were checkpoints that were present, but didn't exactly exist. I mean, just look at Woohoo Loop. You end up in the next key checkpoint zone, even though you aren't the closest to it. It just registers that you are the closest to it. After further inspection to cases like this, a potential potential explanation arose for why it happened. Upon landing in certain areas that you're not supposed to, the game will have a division by zero error, which will cause a checkpoint on the map to reappear somewhere else and extend outward infinitely. These checkpoints would be coined as ghost checkpoints. There was clearly a criteria for what causes this error when it came to respawn glitches, but to this day, that criteria has yet to be discovered. Regardless, with this newfound knowledge, it was up to trial and error, as well as theories from the past for new shortcuts, such as the Dino Jungle one, to be discovered. Throughout the rest of 2019, two new game-breaking shortcuts were discovered. The first shortcut was on Wario's shipyard, and the glitch once again lied within the mechanics of MK7. There is this pipe underwater that you're able to get a boost off of to get to the other side of the track, but when you do a hop on the edge of this pipe, you are able to get an ultra boost as the sloped curvature at the edge of the pipe allows for you to propel yourself up. Similar to Neo Bowser's City, if you take advantage of this height and shroom at the right time, you are able to just barely go over this wall and skip a portion of the track. Shinomi holds the world record with a time of 1:42, which lies 9 seconds ahead of the non-glitch world record. The second shortcut that was discovered was a bit more complicated, to say the least. It was known that in DS Airship Fortress, there was a respawn glitch that you could do that would save a few seconds, but within the fortress lay another shortcut, a shortcut that in my opinion was a lot more badass. To this day, no one has pulled off a world record with this shortcut, as it has remained tasks only, but maybe someday, someone will do the unthinkable. As the years passed, a shortcut that saved a few seconds would be found on DK Pass. It looked like a simple hop, but in reality, it was a precise trick that barely saved any time, even when you didn't take the time to set it up. Nonetheless, it was a very impressive shortcut to pull off, especially in world records. Throughout the course of this entire video, I have covered 14 different tracks that have glitch shortcuts within them. There are 32 tracks in this entire game. Although the future of MK7's revolution looked promising, shortcut discovery would once again plateau. Despite this, the MK7 community had one last trick up its sleeve.